Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We're tackling something that might make you squirm a little. We're going to uncover the often hidden connection between pests and public health and safety. Yeah, you heard right. Those creepy crawlies and critters we all try to avoid actually play a big role in keeping us healthy. It's like a secret world we're about to expose. And to make it even more interesting, get this. The bubonic plague. You know that pandemic that changed history? Well, it was basically a massive pest control failure. Fleas on rats spread the disease like wildfire. So today we're diving deep to understand just how important pest control is for all of us. To guide us through this fascinating world, we have health advisor Kristina Rentoul with us. He's incredible at connecting the dots between things that seem totally unrelated, like how tiny bugs can lead to huge disease outbreaks. And later on, we'll also be talking to Travis McIntyre. He's the owner of NO1 Pest Control Brisbane, and he's out there every day putting these theories into practice. We'll get his take on the latest innovations and the challenges pest control faces. All right, Justin, so I think for a lot of people, pests are just annoying, but you're saying there's the much bigger picture here, right? What's the real story, and how do these pests actually impact our health?
You hit the nail on the head, Bella. It's easy to overlook the fact that these everyday pests we try to avoid can actually carry some pretty serious diseases. Take mosquitoes, for example. We all know they're annoying. But they can also spread malaria, dengue fever, and a whole bunch of other illnesses. And let me tell you, some of these diseases can be pretty severe. Leptospirosis, which is spread by rats, can cause high fever, headaches, muscle aches. It can even lead to meningitis. And hantavirus, also spread by rodents, can cause respiratory failure, and in some cases, even death.
Wow, those are some serious consequences. So we're not just talking about being a little uncomfortable here. These pests can actually be life-threatening.
Absolutely. And you know, cockroaches are another example. They're everywhere in urban areas.
Right.
And they carry bacteria and allergens that can trigger asthma and allergies, especially in kids.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
You know, that suddenly makes pest control seem a lot more important. It's less about just keeping things tidy, more about actually protecting people's health.
Precisely. And here's the thing, Bella. We often create the perfect environment for these pests to thrive without even realizing it.
So we're basically inviting them in.
In a way, yes. Things like improper waste disposal. That's like a welcome sign for rats and cockroaches.
It's like we're rolling out the red carpet for them.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing things like standing water are a problem too. I mean, everyone knows mosquitoes love those stagnant puddles.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Stagnant water is a breeding ground for mosquitoes. And even something small, like a bucket you forgot to empty after it rained, that can turn into a hot spot for those disease-carrying mosquitoes.
It's amazing how something so simple can have such a big impact. It seems like we're creating these pest havens without even realizing it.
That's exactly right.
But is it all our fault? Or are there other factors at play here that contribute to this problem?
That's a good point, Bella. While our actions can definitely make things worse, there's a bigger community-level component to this as well.
So it's not just about keeping our own homes pest-free. We need to think bigger about how entire neighborhoods and cities are managing these populations.
Precisely. Think about those disease outbreaks we were talking about. They can often be traced back to inadequate pest control on a community level. And it's not just disease transmission either, Bella.
What's can happen?
Pest infestations can affect things like our food supply.
How so?
For example, rodents getting into food storage facilities.
It would be a disaster.
It can lead to economic losses and potential health hazards as well.
So these tiny creatures can have a ripple effect on whole communities. They impact our health, our economy.
Exactly.
You mentioned structural damage earlier. Can you expand on that a little?
Sure. Things like termites, Bella, they can cause significant structural damage to buildings, which can put people's safety at risk. And it's not just termites. Rodents, for instance, can gnaw through wiring, creating fire hazard, and certain types of beetles can damage wooden structures, compromising the integrity of buildings.
It's incredible how something so small can have such a large-scale impact. But if these pests pose such a significant threat, how has pest control evolved to meet those challenges? Have we moved beyond just reacting to infestations as they pop up?
We have, Bella, and that's where things get really interesting. There's been a big shift towards prevention and more sustainable approaches to pest control. One of the biggest advancements has been the adoption of integrated pest management, or IPM for short.
Okay, let's unpack this IPM approach. It sounds like it might be a bit more complex than just setting out traps and spraying pesticides.
You're right, it's a much more holistic approach.
So how does it differ from those traditional methods? And can you give us some examples of how it works in practice?
Yeah, IPM is all about emphasizing prevention, monitoring and targeted treatments, and trying to minimize the use of those harsh chemicals you mentioned.
So it's less about reacting to an infestation and more about preventing one in the first place. But how does that work? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Imagine you have a rodent problem in your house. With IPM, you wouldn't just set out traps. You'd first try to figure out how those rodents are getting in, or the cracks in the foundation, gaps around pipes. Once you found those entry points, you seal them up, making it a lot harder for those rodents to get in.
That makes sense. You're basically cutting off their access to food, water, and shelter.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical barriers. IPM also looks at modifying the environment to make it less attractive to pests.
So like what?
Well, for instance, you might trim back any vegetation that's touching your house. That eliminates a potential pathway for pests to reach your roof or windows.
So you're working with the environment, not against it. But what about when prevention isn't enough? What are some of the tools in the modern pest control toolbox?
Well, technology has really changed the game. We now have things like thermal imaging cameras.
Oh, they do?
They can detect termite infestations that are hidden within walls.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We can literally see through walls to find problems before they get out of control.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is pretty amazing. We're also using drones now.
For pest control.
Yeah, to inspect large areas for signs of pests. This is particularly helpful in agriculture. Drones can cover vast fields so quickly and efficiently.
So they're like pest control scouts.
Exactly. They provide valuable data that helps farmers manage those pest populations.
It sounds like pest control is getting really high tech. But with all this technology, are we losing sight of the environmental impact? What about those harsh chemicals? Are there any safer alternatives?
That's a great question. And you're right to be concerned about the environment. But the good news is that eco-friendly pesticides are becoming much more common.
So what are they made of?
These pesticides are derived from natural sources like plants, and they break down more quickly in the environment, which minimizes harm to beneficial insects and wildlife.
So we can control pests without creating a whole bunch of new problems.
Exactly. It's all about striking that balance. But even with these advancements, there's a constant challenge we face in pest control: pesticide resistance.
I've heard of antibiotic resistance, but pesticide resistance, what is that?
Well, it's similar to how bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics. Pests can actually evolve and develop immunity to the pesticides we use. It's like an ongoing arms race.
We're constantly trying to stay one step ahead.
Exactly.
So the more we use pesticides, the less effective they become.
That's right. And to make things even more complicated, climate change is expanding the range of some pests.
How so?
Warmer temperatures and changing weather patterns are opening up new areas where pests can thrive.
Areas they couldn't survive in before.
Exactly.
So we're facing a double whammy. Pests are becoming more resistant to our methods, and their territory is expanding.
That's right. It's a tough challenge.
It sounds pretty daunting.
It is. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are a lot of brilliant people out there working on innovative solutions. That's where people like Travis McIntyre come in.
He's the owner of NO1 Pest Control Brisbane, right?
Yes, he's a true pioneer in this field.
Well, we're lucky to have him joining us later. I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about how NO1 Pest Control Brisbane is tackling these challenges head on.
He really is at the forefront of sustainable pest control practices.
I'm excited to hear more from him. But before we bring Travis into the conversation, can you give our listeners a few tips on how they can be more proactive about pest control in their own lives? Let's start with the home. What are some simple things people can do to minimize those pest risks?
Well, it all starts with sanitation. You'd be surprised how many pest problems can be prevented by just keeping your home clean and clutter-free.
It's more than just being tidy.
Right. Those crumbs under the couch, those dishes piled in the sink, they're not just an eyesore, they're a welcome mat for pests.
So we need to break those bad habits that create those inviting environments.
Exactly. And don't forget about proper food storage.
What do you mean?
Invest in airtight containers for your pantry staples. You know, those cardboard boxes and flimsy plastic bags. They might seem convenient, but they're no match for a hungry rodent or a determined insect.
That makes sense.
And here's another quick tip. Store your pet food in sealed containers as well. It's like a gourmet buffet for many pests.
Those are great tips.
Yeah.
What about outside the house? Anything people can do to reduce pest problems in their yards and gardens?
Absolutely. First and foremost, eliminate any standing water. Remember those buckets we talked about earlier? Empty them regularly, along with any other containers that collect water. And make sure your gutters are clear of debris. You want that water to flow freely.
Clogged gutter is basically a mosquito breeding ground.
You got it. Oh, and here's another important tip. Trim back any vegetation that's touching your house. Overgrown shrubs and trees can act like a bridge for pests to get onto your roof or into your windows.
So create a buffer zone between your house and your landscaping.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered homes and gardens, but what about businesses? Especially those in industries where pest control is really important, like restaurants and food processing plants.
In those situations, it's crucial to partner with a reputable pest control company. Someone like Travis and his team at NO1 Pest Control Brisbane.
So it's not something you want to handle on your own.
Not really. They have the expertise and the resources to develop a tailored plan to manage those pest problems effectively.
And those businesses have a responsibility to keep their employees and customers safe, right?
Exactly. It's about public health and safety. And here's something else for those business owners to consider. Employee training is key.
What should employees be trained on?
Make sure your staff understands the importance of sanitation and proper food handling procedures and what to do if they see signs of pests.
It's a team effort.
It is. It's about creating a culture of pest awareness and prevention.
Well, we've covered a lot today, from the basics of pests to the latest innovations in pest control. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd love to get your take on the future of pest control. Where do you see the field heading in the years to come? Any exciting developments on the horizon? Welcome back, everyone. We've heard from Justin about the big picture of pest control and public health. Now we're going to get a first-hand look at what it's like on the front lines with Travis McIntyre. He's the owner of NO1 Pest Control Brisbane and is known for using innovative and eco-friendly methods. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bella. It's great to be here.
So Travis, we've been talking about how pest control is shifting towards prevention and sustainability, and you've really embraced that at NO1 Pest Control, right?
Yeah, that's right. At NO1 Pest Control Brisbane, we're all about protecting people and the environment. So we focus on integrated pest management, or IPM, as Justin mentioned. It's about prevention, education, and using the least toxic solutions possible. We want to get rid of those pests, but we don't want to create a bunch of new problems while doing it.
I like that approach, finding that balance between effectiveness and responsibility. Can you give us an example of how you've put this into action in a real-world situation?
Sure, we recently helped out a daycare center that was having a real issue with ants. And of course, using harsh chemicals around kids was a no-go, so we did a thorough inspection. And we found that those ants were getting in through some tiny cracks in the foundation. So we sealed up those entry points, and then we used a botanical insecticide. It's derived from plants, so it's a lot safer for kids and pets.
That's a great example of what we've been talking about, addressing the root cause, minimizing chemical use, and finding a solution that works for everyone, including the environment.
Exactly, and that daycare center was thrilled to have a pest-free environment without putting the kids at risk.
That's awesome. Justin mentioned that one of the toughest challenges in pest control is dealing with pesticide resistance. How do you handle that at NO1 Pest Control?
That's a big one. Bella pesticide resistance is a real concern. It's something we're always watching out for, and that's where IPM is so valuable. By focusing on prevention and using a mix of methods, we can reduce our reliance on pesticides. And when we do use pesticides, we rotate the products to prevent pests from building up resistance.
So it's about being strategic, not just throwing chemicals at the problem.
Exactly. We also try to stay on top of the latest research and technologies. There are always new solutions coming out, and we're always looking for ways to improve our methods.
Speaking of innovation, what are some of the most exciting things happening in the pest control world right now? What does the future look like?
Well, Bella, one thing that's really promising is the use of AI and data analytics to predict pest outbreaks. Imagine if we could anticipate where and when pests are likely to strike. We could step in and prevent an infestation before it even starts.
That's pretty amazing. It sounds like we're moving toward a much more proactive approach to pest control.
We are, and there are also some big advancements in biological control methods, like using natural predators or parasites to control pests. It's a much more sustainable way to manage those populations.
So it's about harnessing the power of nature.
That's right. And it's better for everyone in the long run.
Those are some incredible developments. It seems like the future of pest control is heading in a really positive direction.
I think so. We're learning to work with nature instead of against it, and that's a win-win for all of us.
Well, Travis, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us.
It's been great talking with you, Bella.
And to our listeners, we hope you've gained a new understanding of just how important pest control is. It's about more than just keeping things clean and tidy. It's about protecting our health, our communities, and the environment. And remember, effective pest control is a team effort. We all have a role to play. So stay informed, be proactive, and partner with knowledgeable professionals like Travis to create a safer and healthier world. Until next time, keep exploring those hidden worlds around us.